Hi, everyone, and welcome to my show. My name's Allie Martin, and welcome to Heart and Soul Connected, where I have several videos that download once or twice a day that are on short topics, and always love to hear your feedback on any of them. So thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about the Essenes. Who were the Essenes? And there is some speculation recently that they are from a planet Essene. And whether that's true or not is not the focus of what I'm talking about, but it is something that's really comes to light and recently. And so it brought me into the idea of talking about the Essenes. Several years ago, I had a past life regression by somebody else, and they were fabulous, and also an Akashic reading, because you can do it for yourself, but it's nice if somebody else can do it for you. And I was told I was an Essene, and I want to tell you a little bit about that, and also let you know there are a lot of different sects that were around during that period of time. This one is an offshoot of Judaism. And there are a lot of people who believe that Jesus was an Essene. In fact, there has been some books out for that explore that idea. And it was during the time period where he was wandering in the desert, they say. And of course, the Essenes were living in the desert at the time. So they're a group that lived during the 1st century, a time when Judaism was thriving, and various other sects, sects, were emerging. They are significant because of their potential connection to early Christianity. There's an air of mystery around them, and despite being mentioned in ancient text by Josephus, there is a surprising lack of concrete evidence of them and what they did in their daily lives. Scholars have debated freely about their beliefs and practices, and there's no consensus on even what the basics were. I got the sense, though, from what I have read on them that was discovered, was that men and women were part of this group, and they were equal parts in this group. And so it wasn't just an all-male group of people who sought this form of spirituality. Some believe they were a fringe group, while others see them as pivotal to Judaism and early Christianity. The mystery deepens when you consider that much of what we think only comes from a handful of ancient sources, which brings to mind the Mount Vesuvius eruption that everybody died back in, I think it was 79 AD, which this is BC we're talking about. But there were papyrus scrolls that were found, that were burned, and they weren't able to be read. And digital technology has intervened and been able to read them without unscrolling them, because if you unscroll them, everything turns to it's all ash. But they did find that it was information from another scholar at the time who has written copious amounts of other scholarly work. So you have to wonder, is that information still there, just not found? We have heard of the scrolls that were considered to be called the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in the desert back in 1948 or 9. And there has been some deciphering of the Dead Sea Scrolls and how people lived at the time and so forth. But, some of it is still a mystery. And you have to wonder, when will we uncover? But we're uncovering things all the time. Most recently, they uncovered that below the pyramids, there were, I won't say springs, but there were pillars that held up the pyramids that were buried underneath the earth. So to me, it's just all of this coming to fruition over a period of time. And so I really do believe out there that it's quite possible we'll find more concrete written information about this stuff. So the Essenes are often described as living in a communal society with shared resources and a strict code of conduct, which puts us in mind of a certain style of religious I won't say cult because the word is so negative, even though a cult is only a group, but it's a religious community. Let's put it that way. They were known for their rituals, including daily washing and a focus on purity. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I told you of just now, are near Qumran, a site many believe to be the Essene settlement, has provided invaluable insight into some of their culture. But like I said, they still have not completely done all the reading of them, even now. These scrolls contain texts that reveal their interpretations of Jewish law and prophecy. However, translating them hasn't been as straightforward. So again, we're dealing sometimes with language that we're not familiar with, and or it's tedious. But I believe that that's going to probably be swifter now that we have things like AI and other things that can read these things in a much quicker fashion, quite possible. The Essenes' view on purity and the end times are extremely intriguing. They believed in a strict separation from the rest of Jewish society, which they saw as corrupt. So they branched off because they didn't like what they were seeing. Their beliefs about the coming apocalypse and the Messiah figure are echoed in various Christian texts, raising questions about the potential influence of the Essenes' thought in early Christianity. That's why a lot of people believe Jesus was there, and this is where he learned and spent his time for a period of time. The group seems to have a well-defined hierarchy and a strong sense of communal responsibility. Reminds you of monks, let's say, or the Buddhists, how they work with their priests and so on, or a cloister that we might call in modern times. Their commitment to not owning personal property and living in harmony with nature is one of the most fascinating aspects of this, because prior to this, there has been no evidence that others lived in that way. One of the most intriguing insights is their apparent anticipation of a significant messianic figure. Their understanding of prophecy in the end times seems to align closely with early Christian eschatology. The Essenes also placed a significant emphasis on spiritual purity, which could have influenced Christian concepts of spiritual rebirth and baptism. These parallels are too striking for us to ignore and suggest a more intertwined history than often acknowledged. So when I was looking for books to read about spirituality back in the 1990s, one of the books that I read immediately was Jesus and the Essenes. And I highlighted that whole entire book. It spoke to me volumes of the way that I believed that this happened. And then I found Dolores Cannon and some of her work, and she brings that in as well. And so when I was told that I was an Essene, I knew from the very moment I was told that was absolutely true, that I did live in that, because it resonated so deeply with me when I was reading about it that I thought there's no other explanation for why this really just touches my soul other than I must have been there. At the time I read about it, I did not think that, but I could not put down the book or books. There was no way. I had to read it, and I was up all night. And when we are tuned in to what it is that we're reading or that we're learning, and we feel like it really speaks to us, then we see that those things are presented to us at the time we need to learn about them. If you stay, there are people that say, they went into a bookstore and they wanted to buy a book, but they didn't know which book, and then a book fell off the shelf. It's like a divine inspiration. It's a sign. And so when I found these books, one weekend that I was traveling with my family to Arkansas from Texas, I knew that they were meant to be. And I passed them along to anybody else that was interested in learning more about it. And I know there are even more books now, because it's been a long time since the 90s. The Essenes, in summing this up, were a complex group living in the first century that influenced and reflected the religious currents of the time. I don't see them as separatists in the idea that they weren't, say, Jewish moving into Christianity, much like Jesus Christ did. However, they did break away from the corruption that they felt was evident in the Jewish faith. And so there was a hope and a desire to live in a more perfect union with what it is that they believed in with these other people that were in this group. Their communal lifestyle, their strict rituals, and apocalyptic views make them such a fascinating subject. And they aren't just a footnote in history. They offer a window into the diverse spiritual landscape of Judaism. It is something that is so fascinating. And there are other books that are much like that in the Christian literature that we do, the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, and there's other books that were, they said, taken out of the Christian Bible at a later time. All of these bring us to being able to understand what another culture was thinking and how something has come down from the idea of being a myth into a possible true situation. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you feel as though I've inspired you to learn just a little bit more about something you may not have thought of before. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.